This is Benjamin Fulford speaking on December 30th, 2023. The reason I'm speaking a day later than usual is because I was on an airplane at this time yesterday, flying back from Canada. I went to visit my mother, who needed some Christmas cheer, which hopefully I gave her. Now, it was a very interesting trip for me because when I go back to Canada in the summer, I go straight into the wilderness and I forget about civilization. This time I spent the whole week in Ottawa, Canada, and boy, what a dystopia it has become compared to the Canada of my memories. The main conclusion I have from watching, average Canadians at places like shopping malls and Costco and everything is that what's happened to North America basically right now is that you're all living inside Barack Obama's mind. Uh, let me explain this a bit. Uh, Barack Obama is a descendant of Adolf Hitler, and he's also from these pharaonic bloodlines. And that guy has more than just ordinary megalomania. He actually thinks he's some kind of god king. That's how bad his egomania is going. And if you look at what happened since the third Obama regime began in 2020, so let's face it, the so-called Biden administration is a third Obama administration. And because he thinks he's some kind of pharaonic god king, and he is being given control over this huge media apparatus. So things like Netflix and Google or whatever, they all sort of work according to his overall directives. And what happened exactly after 2020? Well, obviously the pandemic, the fake pandemic. So that means he's responsible. And General Mark Milley was his number one hitman. And what did they do? Well, we're now looking back at this whole vaccine and pandemic business. And we know that the Obama regime, the Nazi Obama regime, was spreading the pandemic, which failed to kill the amount of people they wanted. So they then went for phase two, which is the mass vaccination. Now, looking at the evidence from the vaccines, it seems clear that there were basically three types of vaccines. One was designed to kill people. This is the one that causes your heart to produce spike proteins, and that lets your immune system and makes your immune system attack your heart. This was used to kill dissidents, undesirables, according to them, of course. So basically, they were targeting the elderly, the weak, minorities, and then the dissidents. Now, the other group of vaccines, which is what the vast majority got, were intended to genetically alter people to make them more submissive. So turn them into sheeple who would never, ever again try to resist authority. This will be proven as the war crimes tribunals begin. Now, the third category was for the elite, which was just salt injections or placebos or no vaccination at all. And all this was tied to an attempt to give everybody a mark of the beast digital ID. And so absolute total social control, where if you fail to obey the God King's mind, you would be cut off your food, medicine, etc. So I think, I was never brought up to think in biblical terms, but boy, if you're ever going to choose an antichrist, I would say Barack Obama is the candidate for the job. So right now, a number one white hat military priority is to hunt down Barack Obama and his entire entourage and bring them to justice. It's a good bet they're hiding either in Chicago or Hawaii. I'm guessing Chicago. But anyway, we need a military operation to capture that man and bring him to justice. Now, the other thing, of course, because you've been living inside his mind, he's obsessed with things like he was filling Europe and North America with non-European military-age males because he was afraid Europeans would not submit to his God King rule, and that's why he had all these non-European military types put in there. So that's the one problem that's being dealt with. These males will now all be deported or need to be deported unless they are actually working. Okay, if they have a job washing dishes or as a nuclear physicist or whatever, leave them alone. If they're parasiting, kick them out. We don't need parasites. Yeah, women, children, that's a different story. We can support them, but not non-working military age men. They may either work or get out. That's what's going to happen. Now, this process will, the other thing, of course, getting back to Barack Obama, is because you've been living in his mind, he's, he lives in a marginal world of transsexual, cross-dressing, sex-changing people who, and he's trying to impose this very minority worldview on everybody. And that's just a sign we don't need a God King to rule us. We don't want to be inside some person's mind. We want to be in our own minds and living as free, sovereign human beings. And that's what we're going to do. So the white hat priority is to find that man and remove him. Okay, that's the problem. And the other problem, of course, is Benjamin Netanyahu. He is the #1 Satanist in the world now in military terms. And unfortunately, he is still not being hunted down and brought to justice, but that is a high priority. We need to get that man. We need to remove him. If he cannot face war crimes trials, and he needs to be, if he resists arrest, he needs to be shot down. That's it. The man is one of the worst mass killers in human history, and he has to be removed. So again, that's the #1 priority. All this should happen in the new year, but as you can tell, the old system is collapsing, and no viable alternative has yet been presented for the West, which is why we are hoping to start a new Bretton Woods conference to come up with a sane replacement for the post-war system that is now collapsing. This means the UN Security Council, the BIS, the World Bank, the IMF, all that needs to be completely and totally revamped. Now, another thing I'm starting to realize is that China, communist China, is not what you think it is. Now, I'll tell you something. I don't think I've told you before. I was approached by a group called the Lotus Freemasons, the Chinese Lotus Freemasons. And they claim to have 55 million members, including Xi Jinping. But here's the thing. The highest person they sent to see me was a Chinese crypto Jew, okay? And it turns out that Xi Jinping is a member of the World Economic Forum. So there's a good bet that communist China was secretly following the orders of Klaus Schwab and the people in Davos. That is going to come to an end. China will return to Chinese rule, and the same with Japan and the rest of East Asia. The East Asia will be ruled by East Asians as it was supposed to be. But in any case, we are witnessing the end of an old regime and the chaos that accompanies it. At the same time, we are almost ready to embark on a new age, and hopefully in the new year, the dawn of the new age will be apparent, and it's always darkest before dawn. So remember that, folks. The good guys are winning, the white hats are winning, and this dystopia you're in is going to end. Well, that's what I have to say for myself, and now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
And then we have our first question for today. You suggest hypothetically 2012 to be year 1. The zodiac we always had, whether tropical or sidereal, was based on decans. Still is units of 10, which is considered a natural human cycle as far as I know. Since we are in a 12 cycle with the Gregorian, it's going to fundamentally change how we live. To me, it would feel more natural as far as daily routines and our sleep cycle too. That will relieve lots of pressure we all feel about being out of joint. If it is related to the golden mean ratio, that would also mean the frequency switch to 50-51 instead of the current of our grid at 60 hertz, which literally hurts us physiologically. The question being, will that shift? Can you elaborate on the calendar shift you referred to? What do you know as far as details about what this change will be like for us?
Well, this is always going to be something that the experts will work out. But what I have learned when I'm dealing with the world's top secret societies is that at the very highest level of world power, they do align their activities with the solar movements, with the movements of the stars and the planets. That's how they calibrate what they're doing. But for us humans, I think definitely living closer to the cycles of nature is healthy. When I was, living outdoors as a youth and waking up with the dawn and going to bed with the darkness and stuff, I never felt healthier and happier in my life. So, whatever we're going to obviously try to adjust our calendars and our daily routines as much as possible to fit natural cycles because it will be healthier. And again, the calendars need to be realigned so that they once again in harmony with the planets and the natural systems that we live in. So the details will be worked out in public by experts with everybody's input. But hopefully it'll be a healthier, happier calendar and more in touch with the natural world. The details, though, will come in the future. Next question.
Hi, Ben. During an interview last week, per se, with Gene DECODE on Nino's TV, he said there are not two Trumps, but only one. What are your thoughts on this?
What I have done is, because the internet is a network that can be faked in very realistic ways. What we have done is we've sent a physical analog human person to meet the physical Donald Trump and figure it out. And the initial answer we got, but was still a digital answer, coming from people we've met physically, so it's probably real, is that there are two Trumps. The fake one doing the media circus is the one in Mar-a-Lago, and he's being run by P2 Freemason by the name of Leo Zagami. And the real one is at Mount Shan military base. And what I've been told is that when you see Trump with Melania at his side, that's the real one. But we'll keep trying to get to the bottom of this. But it looks like there are two Trumps. Although another way of looking at it is, if you think of World War II, if you're living in Germany and you're living in England, you're getting two completely different versions of Adolf Hitler. So that might be the situation as well. We'll try to get more to the bottom of this. Next question.
Ben, patriots are hearing conflicting reports about FEMA. Some say they are planning a roundup of MAGA. Others say they are white hat controlled. We hear about shootouts in Maui and Nashville. Then when we ask truthers, we are accused of spreading fear porn. Is FEMA a danger to the people?
It depends on who wins this battle for, the Republic of the United States. If the White Hats win, then obviously the Satanists are going to go into the FEMA camps. And if the Satanists win, then obviously it's the Patriots who are going to go. So you're in a fight for your lives, folks. So don't take this lightly. This is it. This is a time when you have to draw a line in the sand, get your gun, and defend your family. It's do or die now. Next question.
Hello from Czechia. Last week, we've been struck with what appears to be the worst mass shooting in the independent country's history. And the whole thing gets more suspicious every day, since the authorities seem to go out of their way to label the alleged suicidal shooter as super anti-government, probably so they can use it against the growing opposition. Have you come across any intel about this?
Let me look into it, but from what you're telling me, it sounds like a government-organized false flag to justify government repression of the citizens. And we've heard that Czechia has been taken over by some pretty bad Nazi types, and I recommend to the Czech military and people to remove the current government and free Czechia. But I'll look into it more. Next question.
And we have our last question for today. I know this is far advanced, but do you expect President Donald Trump to win the next presidential election? And if he did, would that be a clear sign that the KM are overthrown? What would it mean for the world?
If there is actually an election in 2024 and a so-called Donald Trump is elected, this will mean that the Khazarian mafia cabal is still in charge, and they're going to try to appease the masses with limited reforms under a fake Trump. There should not be an election 2024 because the election was stolen in 2020, and that needs to be rectified. And a new fake election is not the way to do it. So if there's an election, it means that the cabal is still in charge, and you need to keep fighting. Well, that's it for me, and hope to see you again next week and next year, and let's all fight to make it a really happy new year. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.
Back to DOGE just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some in this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that DOGE is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70.
And swear by my name like they taught my people of Israel to swear by Baal. If they do not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation. They're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. Asaph was a worship leader for King David, but we're also told he was a seer or prophet. 2 Chronicles 29, verse 30. And he, at a time when Israel was, had one, as he's going to, the Arab peoples had, over the diaspora, had gone into the promised land of Israel. It was called Palestine in 135 AD. It was renamed Palestine. Never was really a country. It was always loosely defined borders, depending on whoever controlled the area. But it was called Palestine. And then in 1948, it became Israel. And so he was saying, I'm going to pluck out the evil neighbors from what is now going to be called Israel, put them back into their ancient homelands. And I'm going to pluck the Jews out who were living in some of those Arab countries there, lands, and bring them back into what is now going to be called Israel. So we saw that happen in 1948. Now, what he had to do, the Ottoman Empire had controlled the Middle East from 1517 to 1917. There could be no Arab states or Israel with them having control over that area. So in World War I, they got defeated, the Ottoman Empire, the Turks. And all of a sudden we find in the 20th century, the Arabs starting to get their states back. So for instance, Egypt was 1922, got its statehood. Saudi Arabia and Iraq were 1932. Iran, formerly Persia, was called Iran in 1935. Lebanon, 1943, Jordan and Syria, 1946, and then along comes Israel, 1948. So we see that they're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. The Arab states got their statehood. This is a sovereign act of God. He said he would put them back into their lands. I'll continue to read these verses and show you how that plays out.
Yeah, now,
All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.
Back to DOGE just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some in this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that DOGE is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70